crisis. The panelists today include Mr. Anshuman Awasthi, Dr. Anshuman Awasthi, my apologies, Vice President R&D for ePowertrain EE at Mercedes-Benz Research and Development India, Mr. Ramanathan V, Vice President and Head OE Sales and Marketing at WABCO India, Ms. Sapna Ahuja, Chief Operating Officer, MapmyIndia, Mr. P.K. Banerjee, Executive Director, SIAM, Mr. Srinivas Aravapalli, CEO, Bluebinaries Engineering and Solutions, Dr. Madhusudan Joshi, Deputy General Manager, ICAT. And to moderate this discussion and give his initial insights, I now welcome Mr. Ashim Sharma, Partner and Group Head, Auto Engineering and Logistics, Nomura Research Institute. Ashim, over to you, please. Thank you.
One request, Vivek, can you enable the video? Yeah, I think yes.
Good morning, everyone. I will just show a short presentation and then we can get into the panel discussion. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is visible.
Sure. So once again, good morning and thank you, Dipanshu, for this opportunity. So just to set a bit of a context for the panel discussion, I'll run through a few slides on the automotive electronics market and what's happening right now, and then we can jump into the discussion basis that. So if we see today, advanced safety features in the vehicle are multiplying, the infotainment features are coming up, and also electronics in the powertrain is increasing. As you can see on the slide, there are quite a few features that are now available in vehicles in India, like the seatbelt reminders, reverse sensors, ABS, airbags, speed alert system, etc. Also, some things which are available largely in the high-end models, like adaptive cruise control, drowsiness detection, active park assist, adaptive headlights, 360-degree camera, and also some things that might come in the future in terms of ABS or enhanced accident response systems. Alongside that, as I said, also in the powertrain, and where all of this is being catalyzed on account of electrification, whether it's the BMS of the battery, the inverters, the DC-DC converters, the onboard chargers, electronic power steering, or we having the high voltage cabling or wiring harnesses on account of both plug-in hybrids as well as electric vehicles. We also see that as far as localization of these components is concerned in India, it is still quite nascent, and 70% of the auto electronics is imported from countries like China, Taiwan, and Germany. Also, a lot of the critical EV components continue to be imported. The government has set out some timelines for localization, and auto OEMs and tier ones are looking at forging partnerships so as to localize these components in India. We also see that the ecosystem is expanding to beyond just the traditional supply chain players, that is the tier ones and the OEMs, to people who are making softwares, who are making navigation systems, infotainment user interfaces, cloud providers, the traditional hardware providers, chip providers, and also the infrastructure players. So essentially, the ecosystem is expanding way beyond the conventional automotive industry. We're also seeing a lot of changes happening in terms of vehicle architectures. One thing that I think we were just hearing about, how software is becoming more and more of the differentiator and hardware becoming commoditized. That is happening also in terms of electronics per se in the vehicle. There is an evolution happening from, say, where we had one box serving one function to moving into more like modular ECUs to finally getting into zonal and central ECUs. And while we see the far right of this happening more in the advanced vehicles, slowly all other segments of the vehicles are also expected to migrate in this direction. And also the role of semiconductors, which we'll also touch upon more in the panel discussion, since it's been sort of a hot topic for many months now, how those have been enabling addition of more and more complex features at lower cost and quickly. And today, the supply chain of that also creating major constraints for us. Finally, it's also important for any company that is planning to enter into the automotive electronics space to assess the opportunity in terms of, say, value chain integration. So, Is there a need for, say, a wider scale of operations, larger scale of investment? So wider scale of operations, for example, maybe for sensors, larger scale of investment, maybe for the likes of, say, semiconductors. Is the technology changing at a rapid rate in this industry, and also are cross-industry linkages important for success? Also, in terms of the business model, as we see, traditional automotive OEMs and new entrants are trying to carve out lucrative opportunities. Some are trying to extend control over the value chain. For example, Ford investing in Velodyne, or people are forging alliances like OEMs and tier ones is common, but also at the same time, tech companies like Google and Microsoft doing that. A lot of backward integration is happening, and also new entrants, especially leveraging the electronics manufacturing space, setting up SMT lines, etc., is becoming more and more commonplace. And finally, also looking at the synergies with the existing business models. So, and that could be, say, through long-term JVs and tech alliances, looking at a dual shore manufacturing model, wherein, say, the advanced manufacturing steps are still happening outside India, but some of the other things happening within the country, and also some sort of regroupings happening in the supply chain, whether it's consortiums of OEMs or tier ones. So with that, that was just like an overall perspective, and I think with that we are ready to jump into the panel discussion, and we have an august gathering of speakers today with us, representing all the key aspects of the ecosystem of electronics and the automotive industry. So once again, welcome all of you, and looking forward to the discussion today. So I'll start with the question which clearly sets out how this industry, and hence the opportunity of electronics, is coming around for India. So we see that from a demand perspective, there are a variety of drivers ranging from powertrain electronics, EVs, safety, including ADAS, infotainment, connected vehicles, etc. So on this note, I just wanted to first start with Mr. P.K. Banerjee's perspective. So we see that India is highly aligned with many of the regions across the globe in terms of regulations, whether it's UNECE, NHTSA, so on and so forth. Therefore, for some of these new applications, say around the area of safety, what is your view in getting these into India from, say, an infrastructure readiness point of view, and also maybe customization for the Indian conditions?
Thank you, Ashim, and thank you everyone present here for joining this very pertinent and relevant topic of auto electronics discussion. In 1987, when the VUCA word was coined, volatility, uncertainty, and complexity with ambiguities, I think auto electronics situation today is very well aptly defined with this word. And the kind of disruptions we are seeing that member companies are talking about disruptions as high as 60% of the production hit. That's bringing the auto electronics supply chain and its relevance to Indian auto market is very, very critical. So if you look at the drivers, that what is driving, it has already been talked about in the morning session, but to best of my understanding, regulation is one, followed by the standards, quality control orders, CROs, and of course the supply chain requirements and customer expectations. So out of this, if I see in India, we have a current situation which is very, very alarming. And in this context, if you look at the localization content of auto electronic component in annual import bill, it's hovering around 13 to 14%, and of the order of, say, 15,000 crore. And if you look at the kind of technology capabilities we are having a challenge with, I think we are not yet well placed to localize these components very soon. So in a time horizon of, say, 0 to 2 years, I don't think we will be able to do some advanced electronic localizations, but maybe after 2 to 5 years, maybe some percentage of it, maybe 15 to 20% of components may be localized. That's our assessment of the situation. To the tune of, say, 4 to 5,000 crore of import reduction can happen. But the regulatory point of view, when we talk about the mandate on say CRMs, maybe the mandates on braking systems, the response time, the residence time we require, it has already been talked about. The speed of sensing analysis has to be commensurate with the expectation on the safety requirements in the field. So, to best of our understanding, where we are at this point in time, we should focus more on our supply chain disruptions, management. Entire focus should be on that, because COVID, when it hit us in 2020 with Wuhan area getting the first COVID wave in March 2020, we saw the disruptions, and subsequently now we realize that we have mandated, for example, for two-wheelers, the ABS for more than 150cc, and then the kind of disruptions are there. Maybe we could have done away with for the time being, some kind of limited period waivers. Otherwise, these disruptions are going to hit in a manner that ultimately the entire system of employment and economy will be hit in India. So in our context, we should pause for a while for new, regulations mandate until we have a very clear vision of managing our supply chain. And you know that external uncertainties are also causing a big disruptions. Leave aside the kind of mobility transformation is happening in terms of connected, autonomous, electric, and shared mobility. So I would pause here and then subsequently we'll take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Banerjee, for that very pertinent perspective on how managing what's staring us in the face right now in terms of also COVID and the supply chain is more important before we get into the next set of regulations. I think at this point in time, I'd also like to bring in Dr. Joshi, because I think test agencies also play a key role in some of these new things getting introduced and how they can be adapted for India. So what is your perspective, Dr. Joshi, of this? And are you seeing a lot of action happening on this front?
Yeah, thank you, Ashim. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for, inviting me for this important topic of the panel discussion. And I'm a part of this event since morning, and I've been listening to the speakers since morning, and also, listen to the views of Mr. Banerjee. So as far as just to give you a background, for last almost 5 to 7 days, we have been working with our parent ministry to discuss something which we call as advanced automotive electronics, and they actually have been talking to us to make them understand what we can classify as advanced automotive electronics, because they actually have a intent to roll out something related to advanced automotive to promote that in upcoming vehicles. So we have been talking to all the stakeholders, including SIAM, including members from ECMA, members from other quarters, to understand and help us to define, make a definition of this advanced automotive electronics, and also to make us understand that from the Indian perspective, what could be the best way to do a phase-wise implementation of this advanced automotive electronics. As Mr. Banerjee has mentioned, though the technology is available, we have to really understand what could be feasible and what could be appropriate from Indian context. There are a lot of limitations, challenges we are facing since morning. Speakers have been talking about it, talking about the condition and the situation of manufacturing of semiconductors in India. Also, the infrastructure available to support these technologies, even if these are fitted to the cars or the vehicles. So we have been working on it. And in addition to that, I would also like to speak that the test agencies like ICAT and ARI, etc., should also be equipped to validate these kind of systems, even if they are coming to fitted in the car, because unless we validate these systems, we cannot just adopt it on as-is where-is basis, because the situation, the traffic conditions, the road conditions outside India are very different from in the developed countries, are very different, as we know. And we have been seeing in last 2 days, when there is a downpour of rainfall in India, what happens in Delhi and all. So we have to look at all those aspects, that can we adopt this technology on as various basis? So as Mr. Banerjee has rightly mentioned, that we have to work upon regulatory front, right? We have to set up these regulations, and we also have to, collectively decide how we should bring in these technologies, and how we should, also look into the aspects of functional safety and cyber security, which are also coming as a bigger challenge when these connected technology we are talking about. So we are also, trying to, run some programs where we try to, indulge industry. I would not say educate, indulge industry to create an awareness on these topics of functional safety and cyber security. So far the situation is not very good, but gradually, all the stakeholders have started understanding the importance of these topics, and we are hopeful that with the support of our parent ministry, we should also be, addressing these topics, so that a complete ecosystem can be in place, and we can make a smooth transition from all with all, all and everything which is required to be done from regulatory side, from technology side, from implementation side, all taken care of. So this is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for spelling out how that roadmap is being created, right from defining advanced auto electronics to actually, from a regulatory technology and implementation standpoint, and also touching upon the cybersecurity aspect, to which I'll go to Ms. Sapna just in a while to understand more about that as well. But thank you for that perspective. Before that, I'd like to go over to Mr. Ramanathan. Mr. Ramanathan, your company supplies safety systems to a variety of segments, whether it's PVs, CVs, or highway, so on and so forth. What sort of demand are you seeing, in terms of auto electronics in the Indian automotive industry?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks to the team for giving me this opportunity to join this panel of industry experts. We typically supply 10 to 12 ECUs for the vehicles, starting from ABS, ECAS, electronic control air suspension, tire pressure monitoring system, and electronic stability control, ADAS, and connectivity, and and the vehicle control modules and other things. So as the regulation is going on in many spheres, like safety, we are catching up with the European regulation. Emissions, we are already there. Connectivity, we are also on par with the European. So the demand for the electronics components, many speakers have spoken before me. I don't want to touch that. I would like to maybe share our experiences in ZF over the last 6 to 12 months, where we are, like Mr. Banerjee put out, we are spending much of our management bandwidth in addressing the supply chain concerns and ensuring that the customers are not affected because of that, and they go on in meeting the regulations proactively. Like last 6 months, we are seeing the demand for ECUs are increasing, and the supply chain, not only it requires a deeper skill in understanding the supply chain logistics, not only going up to the tier 1, up to tier 2, tier 3, because any of the link is broken, then you are facing this situation. So we have put a lot of efforts in understanding the supply chain logistics, and wherever we are impacted, we have also put experts in identifying the alternate materials. Like in general, the forecast system has become a long-term forecast. Like earlier, we used to give 6 months forecast is adequate, but now 1 year or 52 weeks, or even in some cases 2 years forecast is being talked about the electronic supply chain. And then and whenever there is even after giving the forecast, then there are some shortages and the specific components, you will be facing problems. Then your expertise comes here in identifying the alternate material, and also identifying what sort of risk if you use the alternate material, and how you can use that and validate and shorten your validation cycle time, so that your customers are not on. Proactively, you validate and release it so that your customers are not impacted. So in general, we expect this situation to continue for next 1 year, and after 1 year we see some stable situation. Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Ramanathan, for sharing your perspective, and clearly understand when 10 to 12 ECUs per vehicle, what sort of a situation you are facing, especially with the supply chain constraints that are going around. So thanks a lot for sharing that.
Yeah.
With that, I'd like to go on to Ms. Sapna to, so one is the safety aspect, the other is this whole connectivity, infotainment aspect also that is coming in. But again, as Dr. Joshi was also mentioning, all this hinges on a cybersecurity framework as a backbone for all of this to prosper. So, what's been your experience at MapmyIndia? Are you seeing a lot of adoption of these features? But is that cybersecurity framework somewhere also a bottleneck that needs to be resolved for this market to really take off?
Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you. Thank you for asking this question. Quite interesting. So we have been in the space of providing case solutions to various automotive OEMs. So we've connected autonomous, shared electric vehicles, vehicle mobility related solutions. When it comes to safety and connectivity in particular, what we're trying to do is we're trying to push certain types of alerts, certain type of mobile applications, which the consumers would typically use to understand where the safety issues are and how really to act or basically navigate in such kind of scenarios. And since now, a lot of these applications are connected or hybrid applications, connectivity is definitely very critical. And we all know there are regulation, the constraints around number of IPs that we have in place, primarily from the perspective or primarily to take care of the cybersecurity issues. But, as we are progressing in terms of technology, as we are progressing in terms of providing more features, more value additions to the driving in India, so that, the typical requirements with respect to the road conditions, with respect to the safety alerts, or with respect to in future, if we have to go autonomous, then from that perspective, if we have to go in that direction, then there is definitely a lot which is to be done on the cyber security regulations around automotive as well. There's more requirement of different types of data which is to be pushed into the vehicle. So let's say, I'll give you some examples here. Examples like when you're driving, you need to know where the next, if there's a traffic jam on the road. I'm taking a very simple example here. Or when you're driving, you need to calculate the driving range if it's an electric vehicle. Then calculation of driving range also requires a lot of data parameters which would come from connectivity only. So hence, while we have to be very, very particular in terms of the security, cybersecurity rules, regulations, at the same time, we also have to ensure that these regulations do not come in the way of, I would say, they have to be structured in a manner that they don't stop users from consuming the technology that they deserve. And we can definitely take examples of, from what's happening in Europe or what's happening in America, and how they are, how those nations are providing such solutions, such experiences to the consumers to enable safety and convenience while driving. And things. I mean, even if we talk about ADAS systems, where we are talking about embedded vision technology, which allows or creates some kind of, I would say, some kind of protective bubble around you to understand where the objects are, to also understand what kind of, I would say, to understand the driving errors and also the pedestrians, the cars, other vehicles on the road. So even from building these, building these technologies or making these solutions available, it's important to, I would say, to have the, to ensure that, the security guidelines, the cyber security guidelines are also structured in that manner. So, I mean, we are at our end, we are building systems that enable lane departure warning, the collision avoidance, the driver drowsiness detection, and so on. And yeah, I think I'll take a pause here.
Sure. Thank you, Sapna, for sharing that wide-ranging perspective from a connectivity standpoint. And with that, I think it's only apt to go over to Mr. Srinivas. To say, your company is sort of converting traditional cars into smart cars, and so you have had an extensive background as a veteran in the industry, looking at this space. So, Mr. Srinivas, how are you seeing, some of these things come into the Indian marketplace in terms of making cars smarter? At the same time, your take also on, are we ready from an infrastructural standpoint on that? And also, very interestingly, something that Mr. Ramanathan also touched upon, that, due to supply constraints, then you're looking at putting it something else, quickly validating it, and bringing it to the customers. So are you also seeing yourself as to the forefront of doing such things on account of the supply chain disruption as well? So a slightly wide-ranging question to you, but I thought it's only apt to ask you that one.
Yeah, it's a quite wide range. Yeah, just to touch upon that supply chain part, first of all, you all are fully aware. Everybody on the screen, more or less, I know them, but for one or two, but I had interacted with them in the industry. Yeah, as you all know, the shortage is very severe, and it's more of like a second pandemic to the automotive industry. This is what I have to put it, if I have put it in the right perspective. Because the auto sales plummeted almost 80% in Europe and very close to 50% in US, and due to lack of either demand on account of shortage of semiconductors or whatever the reasons, overall degrowth is very high, and the main important reason is the semiconductor shortage. See, what exactly has happened for this shortage? Just give me 1 second. There is some disturbance. So this did not happen. The shortage did not happen due to a single incident, and also is not a disruption just like that had happened. Instead, it's a confluence of events contributed to the situation. The factors mainly, as you again, all of you know, the remote working from homes. This is one thing, combined with the greater need for connectivity. This is one reason. Online coaching, online schools, leading to a greater demand for the personal computers, the servers, the equipment that is required, the Wi-Fi requirements, blah, blah. Today, about 200 people, all of us join this meeting. You need 200 laptops, you need a lot of Wi-Fi, you need a lot of servers, you need so much of equipment for the connectivity. So all this led to a shortage of semiconductor, and definitely there was a capacity crunch. So what do we do from Indian perspective or the overall industry perspective in order to work on this challenge? First and foremost, as the colleague from JEDF has already mentioned, you have to have some kind of upfront commitment, kind of a long-term commitment in terms of volumes, in terms of projections. Then second part, like more of a balanced risk-taking plan, and it should be aligned along the value chain. You have to have that risk mitigation plan, and we have to share along the value chain. This also should be done upfront as a planning. And there should be another strategy, like, assessing some kind of an assessment, factoring the cost of compromises in areas like sourcing resilience and the software lifecycle, etc. We have to have a different strategy here. And also it could be like selective investments in supply chain if needed for any small companies, wherein, for selected components, or in the areas of uncertainty where you feel that there is going to be uncertainty, in those areas, if needed, you have to go for an investment. This is what I would like to just touch upon on the supply chain. When it comes to the technology part, starting from the regulation, which PK Banerjee has already talked about it, and my colleague Madhusudan Joshi talked about the other aspects like cyber security, and he has importantly mentioned about functional safety. Sapna also talked about a couple of things. Answering your question, Ashim, I would say, like, definitely from a future mobility standpoint, India is geared up, but not to the extent the way that is happening with regards to the domain controllers and END architecture, which is happening outside India, especially West, because we are contributing to some of the programs, especially the luxury cars, electric cars, and electric trucks, wherein we are dealing with a big, huge complexity. And also very complex hardwares. To touch wood, the infotainment size would be as high as about infotainment or the dashboard on your car would be as high as about 50 inches. We have one piece in our office where we are working for 42 inches dashboard, which has got three compartments of three different the one is navigation part, one is the overall vehicle information, including the health of the vehicle. Then the third part is the multimedia, the so-called all kind of entertainment stuff. So a lot of work is happening in India, by the way, in India for outside market. But the things that other we heard from the Rashmi Rao, very good, this is wonderful insights about the software. The software development process also is changing, and we are all geared up towards the software development process change. The change that is being initiated, could it be through various tools like MBD, model-based development, or could be any other simulation techniques and tools? And definitely we are changing ourselves. At the same time, she also has mentioned OEMs wanting more control on software. This is true. Every OEM is going to have their own operating system. The OS will be owned by the OEM, and the software content will be provided by somebody outside, like anybody else. That itself can become a supply chain. So there is definitely a possibility of India to catch up to that level of the current technology, because the work is happening in India and it would percolate to the Indian OEMs. In India, especially having 30 years spent in OEM, how it works is like, when we take a decision on the technology roadmap, we look at several aspects like what exactly is required for the Indian consumer point, and affordability, the cost consciousness, and importantly, the complexities that to be dealt with in the aftermarket. When you have to update a software, when you have to open it and repair it also, the vehicle should not be off the road. So several aspects are being taken care, being considered, and very cautiously the roadmaps are drawn in a gradual manner. So definitely the kind of technology, the technology that is happening outside India is going to come to India, including END architecture, domain controllers, and the kind of operating systems, the new OS that I talked about, all that is going to happen. Functional safety is already happening. Many of my other colleagues participating, they know, and it has to gear up. Same way, cybersecurity also has to catch up. It started in bits and pieces. So all in all, I would say we are in the journey, and we have to work a lot more in order to catch up with the rest of India.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas, for giving the very detailed answer, right from the supply chain aspect of it to how people are making it India, but making it India for the world, to also how affordability, cost consciousness, and aftermarket serviceability is very important, and also on the backbone of cybersecurity, functional safety, and then the road mapping for that being a very vital component for this to happen. Thank you so much. With that, it brings me, to Dr. Anshuman Awasthi. So we know that luxury cars, and especially Mercedes-Benz, has been responsible for really creating the market for various technologies, whether it's in India, whether it's across the globe. And many of your cars already have these very advanced safety, infotainment, connectivity features. So what has been your experience? Has all of this required tremendous amounts of customization for India, or they have been so designed, robust enough to have been put in India and been serving consumers to the extent that was envisaged while putting those features in the car?
Interesting question, Ashim. Thank you very much. So first of all, honored to be in this panel, and so far all insightful comments I have heard from all the experts here. So coming back to your question is that how easy it is for, let's say, Mercedes-Benz to sell the products in India with Indian requirements, etc. I mean, in some cases, yes, it is quite modular where you can switch off, switch on things. And in some cases, it is not so. So you would have to, probably rework on few things, do more work, and do the entire development part or homologation part, and then you have to bring things. So on the other hand, I think the future, the way we are looking at, and I agree with some of the panelists here because I just don't disagree with everybody else, but some of the panelists because they have touched upon the part, for example, software complexity, as well as the operating system. So that is the future, because future is that when we have a modular approach to not only to, let's say, system, but plus hardware plus software both. So OS is a reality, operating system is a reality for automotive OEMs. However, one thing is also very, very real for automotive OEMs is that the ownership of the software piece. So you will see, and this is what we are doing in India. I come with the electric vehicle and hybrids background. I'm heading, and there is more and more in-house software development we will see, and we are seeing the need for it, that we have to do it in India for the global centers. So, and then this is important because if we have to have a control over the operating system, then the control has to stay with the product owner, that is OEM in our case. And looking at the presence of, let's say, ECUs or MCUs in our cars, and as we grow, for example, an electric vehicle today, I think if you look at the BOM, about 30 to 35% or maybe upward is all semiconductors. It's all ECUs and MCUs, what you call it, whatever you can call it. So that means, and it is a significant increase in terms of the overall, the mass or the volume. And if we want to offer customized solutions to our customers, and here the sample size is not in thousands and millions, it's a sample size, let's say the future sample size for customer is n is equal to 1. That means we need a greater flexibility, and which can only be offered through what experts have talked about, ownership of the OS, and of course, modularity of hardware and software both.
Understand. Thank you so much. And in fact, the next aspect I was going to touch upon was the software aspect of how it's becoming the differentiator, and hardware is becoming more and more commoditized. And you said that the OS ownership remaining largely with the OEM, but then where does it leave suppliers there? Because we know about proprietary parts coming from suppliers today. But now if software is really going to have, that proprietary nature to the part, and the OEMs have the software with them, then, how do suppliers really gear up for that as more and more hardware starts getting commoditized?
Right. I mean, and this is, I don't think I have a answer to that question. And it is, it's unfolding for everyone. Everyone is learning here. Like all classical, all OEMs that we are, and we all are learning here. So few shifts are happening. So I don't think OEMs will get into the business of developing microcontrollers or ECUs, etc. That largely stays with or will stay with the suppliers and experts in the industry, rather than suppliers, but experts in the industry. But however, we are trying to take greater control on the, let's say, application layer, or maybe a little bit of control in the base software, that we want to do it because we want flexibility.
Understood.
And this one shift, probably we all will see that earlier when the base software layer for the ECUs was maybe common across OEMs with minor modifications here and there, there you will see a shift. Now base software layer itself will be a differentiator.
Understand.
So, I mean, this leaves still leaves a lot of space and scope for our experts, suppliers, and I don't think automotive OEMs will go in that space at all.
All right, sure. Thank you for that clarification and the perspective. Mr. Ramanathan, we could get your views also on this. Since you being a large global tier 1 supplier, etc.
Yeah, rightly, as many of the experts have pointed out, the software is becoming a differentiator, and many of the OEMs want to have the control over the software and IP, the ownership on this software. So when we say software, it has different layers of software written on it, and different type of softwares like a base software, the integration software, or the parametric layers and other things. Many of them, like for example, I will quote some examples like the new generation, the AMT software. We give flexibility to the OEM to write their own parameter tuning and application tuning for the OEMs. So many of the OEMs have also appreciated that and welcome them. So it helps them to create variants, and whenever they change the gear ratios and other things, they can change the parameters and release it for different variants quickly. In many cases, in Europe and all, the domain controller, vehicle domain controller, we we work jointly with OEMs on providing functionalities. Like for example, we also work with some of the OEMs to reduce the number of ECUs in the vehicle. So we give them the software as a service. Like for example, suspension control, we can give them as a service, and it can be flashed in their domain controller, vehicle domain controller. So this is another methodology. The third is when we go to the higher technologies like autonomous driving and all, then we also give them a platform. Like for example, we call it as an adopt platform, where autonomous driving open platform technology, where we take care of the basic safety and vehicle dynamics of the vehicle over, and give them a platform in which they can go for further levels of autonomous driving. If they want us to do as a complete system, welcome, we have the capability and we do it for the OEMs. But if they want to have a flexibility to do on their own, our platform is open to third party, the level 3 or level 4 virtual drivers. So some examples I am able to quote.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ramanathan. Very interesting to see how that model has evolved, with software becoming a key play element, and how, that modularity aspect wherein you are giving software at the same time, high degree of customization is present at the OEMs. And thank you for sharing that perspective. And I'd like to also hear Ms. Sapna's perspective on that, because when you also give your, the connectivity solutions, and then they need to interface with the layer of entertainment that the OEM has, are you doing something similar? And what has been your experience, especially operating in the Indian market?
Yeah. So the software layer, like we heard from Mr. Anshuman also and Ramanathan also, that there are different aspects of the software. What level of layer are we talking about? That also becomes very important. So there's two prime platforms that we normally work with when we are working at the automakers. So one is the digital vehicle sync platform that basically takes information from various sensors, processes it, and kind of makes it available for other next layer of application as well. So that's one platform that we talk about. The second platform that we work on is the digital map sync platform that brings in the location aspect to the whole mobility, to the whole vehicle driving. So these two platforms are, our proprietary platform that we've been providing, but the layer of application on top of that, that's where the way we work with OEMs is we try to put their flavor, the way they see the kind of features that they want to make available there to their customers. That's where we try to create differentiation when we work with different OEMs. So that's one aspect. The bottommost layer where we are talking about digital map, vehicle train and digital map train, there also, we are very flexible in the way we work with various OEMs. I mean, one is the software as a service, like what Mr. Ramanathan also mentioned. And second also is, the deploying of these platforms with the OEM itself, so that they have better control, or they also have a joint control over the system. So these are certain models that we have come up with.
Okay, understand. So yeah, very interesting, the models, and especially when you're giving that perspective from largely an Indian consumer OEM perspective. Thanks for sharing that. That also brings me to one last question on the software aspect. So would like to hear your views, Dr. Joshi, because now from a software testing perspective, and we heard the speakers mention about the simulation tools and techniques that are being deployed to bring this about. So things like software in loop testing, so on and so forth. So, what sort of preparedness do the test agencies have on this front, say at ICAT and others? So, Dr. Joshi, your perspective on that. I think maybe there is some connectivity issue at Dr. Joshi's perspective. So while the organizers try to figure that out, let me come to one more aspect. And we've heard that also just in the round of questioning around how the semiconductor shortage is playing havoc in the country, and that's also on top of the fact that April, May we lost a lot of production on account of the second wave, and now you have the shortage already. Auto OEMs are saying how they'll have to reduce production in the coming months. So there I wanted to hear your perspective, Mr. Banerjee. Do you think SIAM as a collective body can do something about this, probably, in terms of making the government act on easing out the semiconductor shortage in the country? Because if we look at global examples, whether it's Taiwan or what's being done in the US today, a large amount of government support is needed for this industry to be brought about, right? So it cannot really be just the play of one company, but, say if the whole association comes together for this and does something with a lot of government support. Do you think some sort of a possibility of that emerging in India for the semiconductor side of things?
I think it's a very important question you're raising because this semiconductor and auto electronic business and technology is evolving so fast. If you look at the driver, the regulation comes number one, and in regulations point of view, if you look at data security and data safety, and of course over the air. So all the three aspects are actually forcing the OEMs to deploy their own architecture in a platform when they try to start, so that the modularity concept come in, and then they are able to handle the regulated data privacy, data security aspect, to say the foremost consideration. And when it is so fast evolving, I think investment can't happen. Very clear, stable policy roadmap is laid out by the government, and at the same time they do incentivize manufacturing, localization, as well as the ecosystem and environment conducive to develop such a kind of advanced technology stuff. So therefore, if you look at the four important considerations which is going to drive auto electronics evolution or development or manufacturing or localization in India. The first one is technology and capability. The second one is obviously the government intervention. And then economy of scale is very important for us. And to get the economy of scale, when you see that there is some kind of PLI scheme is being talked about in some sectors, auto PLI is still awaited. So there the electronic and auto electronic is a focus area. And that because it's such a complex system and investment requirement is very high. Therefore, consortium approach could be the idea to promote. And when it comes to consortium approach, there the support of government will be very essential. So I believe that government is seized of the matter and they recognize what they need to do. The only challenge is that technology is so evolving fast that how exactly it is to be catered to is a challenge. And Dr. Madhusudan Joshi did mention that last full week actually we have been engaged with government. SIAM has been trying to engage not only within the country but also with affairs ministry. We are reaching out to each embassies and respective countries where we can get the semiconductors. Now this disruption of Indonesia and Malaysia in last week because of the COVID surge is further creating a problem. So we are hopeful that having learned our lessons in last 1.5 years and current crisis we are facing, the auto electronics will be the priority focus for the government as well as for the industry to find solution to such uncertainty if we have to manage in future. So I'm sure SIAM and other associations together are in deep dialogue with government, and government recognize that. We are trying to see what best can be done for India. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. Laying it out in terms of technology, the government support scale and also the consortium approach. I just have a slight related question to that. So, when you talk of the consortium approach, we also understand that, the peculiarity of this industry, say in terms of sensors, wherein say automotive alone cannot provide the scale, probably needs then say the consumer electronics industry also to get in and, the production of sensors happening, not just for automotive, but for this industry as well. So just like we talk of an ecosystem expanding when we talk of connected vehicles, electric vehicles to players beyond automotive, do you think SIAM could also look at bringing within this umbrella of electronics companies beyond automotive who could, utilize the same set of suppliers in terms of say sensors or other components, and maybe SIAM could also play a nodal role in, bringing these players together in the country, because even in general in electronics in India, the picture is not that rosy.
See, we have recognized that no longer it's a vehicle-centric industry. Actually, it has actually now getting connected with the infrastructure and ecosystem in a manner that the vehicle remain the part of your life, and there it has to be connected with when we talk about V2X. So in a V2X concept, it automatically gets connected with the other allied industry. So we are already in connect with not only IEMA and other like-minded electronic associations, IESA and Battery Storage Alliance, and then we are also in dialogue with NASCOM. So I think it's a realization now that we will have to expand, and our approach to handle the situation yesteryear mobility as a product is actually becoming mobility as a service. So therefore, we will have to have no choice but to connect with all beyond membership.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Banerjee, for that perspective. That also brings me, staying on this localization and the local supplier aspect. So we also see, as Mr. Banerjee mentioned, other speakers also mentioned, it's a fast evolving field. So we are seeing how ECUs are becoming modular and then zonal ECUs coming in. So I would like to bring that question to you, Dr. Awasthi. So how are you seeing enough of, say, local support from suppliers or localization of the components happening in India, since you are also using some of the most cutting edge probably components in your vehicles? And if not, what do you think could be the steps that could be taken to upgrade the supplier base to supply more and more locally to vehicles in India?
So I'm assuming this question is very specific to the semiconductor part or the electronics or ECU part.
Yes. Right.
So one part of is as an OEM, I don't think I'm the right OEM to take a comment on localization, because most of our production is CKD and
Right.
CBU. Though our partners, expert partners, I call them Bosch and Conti, they all have their development base here. But I think there is a huge merit as in developing the local semiconductor supplier base in India. I think partly because the demand is growing in the industry, partly because whatever semiconductor is used for automotive also overlaps with other industries. For example, telecommunication, especially if you bring in V2X and you bring in 5G and also the smartphone, etc. So there is a overlap. So I think there will be a demand. So in that sense, I think it's a welcome move to localize the production of semiconductor, do it in India, or develop, let's say, larger supplier base for such things.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that perspective.
The only thing would be is when the industry is going, that they have to also probably, or I'm sure they are doing it, but keeping the future, or let's say the future expectation from OEMs in mind, because as we discussed, software is the key. It's going to get more complex. The way we have a distributed EE architecture is getting more and more, let's say, it's coming more into modular and scalable. For example, today we are in a, at least from Mercedes side, we are more in a domain controller approach, and later on it could move to even more centralized. So in that, for that, I think the requirements of semiconductor, or let's say ECUs, will be very different from what they are today. So today, for example, ECUs, you have requirement of sensors and actuators, and the way the network is connected to the vehicle, and of course the power, etc. But later on, when we are getting more centralized, then the semiconductors or the ECUs probably can do with the lesser memory requirement, lesser power consumption, lesser processing, etc. So system on chip kind of approach. So I think these are the things that anyway will come. So that's it from my side. I wanted to share when we are going towards the localization.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Awasthi, for sharing that the futuristic aspect also on what, for example, the SoC becoming more and more prevalent now, and the suppliers probably need to gear up for things like that when they look at localization. Would also like to hear your perspective, Mr. Ramanathan. Are you able to do a lot of tier 2 sourcing within the country, or does it still stay largely imported? And any lessons you have there for the supplier base to upgrade?
Yeah, basically our experience is when there is we expect the volumes either through a mandate or something, then we proactively localize. Like for example, when the ABS came as a mandate, then before the mandate itself, we kicked off the localization program, and then offered almost the ABS system at a very, very affordable price, which is so the OEMs also felt it's a very good value proposition to introduce. Likewise, our connectivity ECU is fully localized. Our tire pressure monitoring system ECU is fully localized, and then so wherever we see there is a business potential, then either through mandate or through a value proposition, then like for example, in the case of connectivity ECU, we partner with two of the leading OEMs and offer it as a OEM solution, OEM branded solution. Then the moment we got the business, secured the business, immediately we kicked off because we have a good team of electronics, the people who understand the electronic supply chain and who can work on the various nitty-gritties of manufacturing and arranging the. So having said, even though our tier 1, the electronic ECU manufacturing is localized, many of the components in tier 2 are, I think most of the components are imported. And that's where the complexities grow. So there needs to be a lot of manufacturing needs to happen in India. Hopefully, many of the companies are jumping in. This PLI scheme in electronics will also help to set up those manufacturing. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, hopefully the PLI does kickstart the process in that. I would also like to hear Ms. Sapna's view on that. since you, how's your experience been in terms of, say, the hardware components for the systems that you've been putting across in the vehicles? Sapna, can you hear us? Looks like maybe not. Maybe we could take your views also, Mr. Srinivas, since you've seen this space for a very long time in your career. So, what's your take on it?
Yeah, in terms of localization, Ashim, I would say yes, from a tier one perspective, India is fully ready and India is fully having established tier ones, mainly the MNCs. You name them, like somebody mentioned, Bosch, Continental, Valios, Brose, Marquardt, Hella. You name them, everybody is there, including the Sians and all. Nevertheless, when it comes to the Indian tier ones, from an electronic standpoint, there's a small gap. We have yet to achieve the levels of quality. We have yet to achieve some of the capabilities from a manufacturing standpoint, some of the manufacturing process standpoint. So that's one gap which I could see, and even now I could see that gap. That's one. Two, the dependency on, as the colleague Mr. Ramanathan mentioned from Jeddah, the dependency on some of the critical components import is still haunting, whether especially semiconductor. Nevertheless, I have one in view of the time, very short time being available. I just would like to add only one conclusive statement is, having seen this severe and serious challenge in the last 1 year plus of semiconductor shortage, definitely if not lot, at least the large industry houses are working towards establishing a semiconductor or a chip manufacturing setups, and some fabs are going to come in India. We have gone through some newses. There were some talks about like a consultation, taking some inputs here and there. There are going to be some setups, manufacturing setup coming up for the display, especially LCD display, TFT display has got a huge requirement over semiconductor, of course, has. So my view is next 1 to 2 years, you will see lots of announcements coming up, filling in that gap of localization of the semiconductor. And they would definitely focus on automotive, because the automotive industry is the one which has triggered this, the need of localization or need in India. So I'm sure this will be bridged. The gap will be bridged. Only one word of caution, having seen various having seen various issues and experiences, definitely we have to have a different strategy for the quality, and it should be absolutely in line with the international. We heard about the Infineon presentation, and extremely robust quality levels are required to catch up with either Indian requirements of automotive industry or even global. So that's all I want to say from my side.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for sharing that very rich perspective, Mr. Srinivas. I think we have Ms. Sapna also back. So, while I think we lost connectivity with you, I had a question around, you've sort of been the front runner as far as navigation systems are concerned in the country. And, so what's been your experience with localization, over the last, say, 1.5 decade, or even today, how you seen that evolving?
I totally agree with what Mr. Srinivas has mentioned. It might take a little bit more time, but yeah, it is bound to happen. And then there are a lot of local players which are also getting into the same field. The international players like Bosch, like Harman, those players definitely they are also trying to figure out how to kind of bring in that localization aspect. We work. I'll just give you a perspective. The MapmyIndia works with all these electronics providers rather than us building our own. So we kind of partner with organizations like Bosch, like Harman, Pioneer, and Continental, and these kind of companies. So yeah, we've been hearing them out. We are also working with some local local players in India who are getting up to speed in this region.
Sure. All right. Understood. Thank you. So I think we're almost out of time. So just summing up, I would request each one of you for sort of, one word more with sort of the topic of the discussion, which was automotive electronics chasing opportunities amidst global crisis. So, your take, in a short sentence on, what do you think is the opportunity, and, maybe one or two things that need to be done for us to, as a country and as an industry, to be able to, harness this opportunity. So, maybe we could start with Dr. Anshuman, you, and, go on.
Right. I think this is a huge opportunity where if India can do something about or start something in the area of semiconductor space. Of course, I think one of the panelists mentioned that the automotive requirements are quite stringent, and that is the reason why I think new entrants is not easy for them to come and bridge the supply. The gap that we are seeing today because of 0 ppm, if you call,
Right.
or the functional safety requirement. So I think if our I think local industry can take care of this, and if that is possible, then definitely I think it's an opportunity, because the demand for semiconductors is going to increase. As I come from EV side, and I know that as more functions are being added, whether it's onboard charging or DC-DC or electric transmission or electric motor, battery, whatever you say, everything needs some software, some controllers. So the demand is huge. So definitely, I think it's a welcome move.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anshuman, on that. Mr. Banerjee, your perspective on the same question.
It's very simple. Minimize risk, minimize external dependency, harness, utilize the strength of IT power India has, and realize that perhaps the hardware, auto electronics point of view, from PCB to fab to sensors, I think we should localize more and have a internal within the country, availability of these things, so that combined together hardware and software, we can become a, powerful powerhouse of auto electronics in the world, in automobile industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Ramanathan, over to you.
Yeah, I think many of the experts have talked about it. In my view, there is a huge opportunity. Like I understand the global electronics market is $2 trillion, and India is only contributing the 4%, just 4% of this business. So there is a huge opportunity. So we have to jointly work together to build an ecosystem. When I say ecosystem, there are many good startups and electronic manufacturing companies are available. Maybe there are some missing links. They don't know about the vehicle architecture or functional safety requirements, like many of us told. And but they are very good in, and they are very agile. And we have worked with a couple of them, and we found it is very useful. Like. But they may not have the required skills of automotive. That's where we plug in with our experience and our experience in validating and doing multiple iterations and other things. But it's a painful cycle. But once they learn, then the next process becomes very easy. So there is a lot of collaboration between industry and academic is also required. Like automotive electronics or vehicle CAN architecture or vehicle domain controllers, these should be part of the academic, so that the new students come with this knowledge easily. Then the third I want to highlight is there should be a lot of ecosystem for testing facilities, and it should be available at a very subsidized cost or something. So for example, the EMC, testing, or many of these validations should be available at an affordable rates so that many of the small scale industries should come into electronics, and then they will be able to use it better. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramanathan. Mr. Srinivas, over to you with the same question.
Sorry, I was on a mute. Very, very short. Future car would be like your today's smartphone. This is what I would envisage, or I would foresee this. And the functionality and features can be downloaded like an app. The way you are doing on smartphone today could be partly at free, partly on a cost basis. And India as a country is definitely poised to contribute towards the future mobility, whether it is for the rest of India or India. Surely it will do, because it has done for the IT and ITES in the last 2 decades. And same success story is going to repeat for India in the area of future mobility. This is my takeaway. And obviously, we have mentioned, I did not mention because so many people talked about entire future mobility is going to be driven by software and hardware. And we are going to be there the way we have done for IT. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. Ms. Sapna, your take on the same question. I think we've lost her again. So, right, I think with that, there's only one question that's come from the audience, and I'll just read it out, and any of you can answer that. They've said that it's from Dr. S. Ravindran, a retired professor with mechanical engineering background. He's asking, in India, do we have thermoelectric seat cooling arrangement? And do you think we can provide a seat cooling arrangement? If we provide a seat cooling arrangement, that would be a good market in India. So any of you can answer that?
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question, Ashim? Sorry for that.
So, seat cooling, so he's saying thermoelectric seat cooling, is that going to be a good market in India?
Brose, I mean,
we do have a cooling and heated seats.
Okay, ventilated seats.
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
So ventilated seats we do have, but they are fan cooled and not thermoelectric. Okay. I'm not sure about whether the thermoelectric has technology has a potential or future here. I'm really not sure.
Sure. Mr. Srinivas, you were also...
as a last point, I wanted to add to Mr. Ramanathan's point. He said that the students need to learn about CAN and other protocols, and they need to learn in the college. And what I wanted to add here is to fresh engineers who are in the college or the graduating. I think apart from that, please do learn that. What we need is that as Rashmi talked about, model-based design and model-based development is the key part. But along with that, please also learn about AutoSAR. It's going to be very, very important, even for companies like us in OEMs. If you want to do model-based development, AutoSAR know-how is crucial, and that's a big change. So far, it was not required.
Sure. Thank you very much. Right. I think with that, we've come to the end of this very interesting panel discussion. I'd like to thank you all for sharing that wealth of information, touching upon all the aspects of auto electronics. And clearly, it seems like a great opportunity area for India. So I'd like to thank the organizers as well as the audience. Unfortunately, we can't see them, but thank you all also for being a very patient audience and listening to everyone. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Dipanshu.
Thank you so much, Ashim, for that absolutely interesting discussion on automotive electronics.